Jungles are extraordinary places, although they cover less than 7% of the Earth's surface and are disappearing at a devastating rate of 30 million acres each year. Tropical forests are home to an estimated 50% of all living things on Earth. So of course these jungles still have their secrets. There are creatures we have yet to discover, large swathes of dense landscapes still unexplored, tribes not yet documented, and ancient treasures buried below the ground. Let's look at some of the mysteries that have been uncovered in the dense wilderness. Number 15. The Costa Rican Spheres. Costa Rica may be famous for a number of reasons, but you may not know that it's also popular for having a large collection of almost perfectly round stone balls. To learn more about these stone spheres that can be found all across the landscape of Costa Rica, we must travel back to the 30s. At that time, the United Fruit Company was in search of new land to begin their banana plantation. They found what looked like the perfect location in the Diquís Valley, which was located in western Costa Rica near the Pacific Ocean. But when the workers began to clear the dense jungle lands, they found something odd: stone spheres. It doesn't sound too strange, but let us explain. Some were only a few inches in diameter, but some were huge. In fact, the largest spheres measured as much as 7 feet in diameter and were as heavy as 16 tons. But where in the world did these spheres come from, or did they even come from this world? It was obvious that these spheres were man-made because rocks didn't just exist in such uniform shapes. Locals quickly began wondering, and many myths developed to explain the stone spheres. For example, some believe they were brought to Earth by, you guessed it, aliens. Others believe that they were linked to the lost continent of Atlantis. The scientific study of the stones began in the late 1930s and early 1940s. Since then, about 300 stone spheres have been found across the country. Although many of the stones are not perfectly round, they are surprisingly smooth, and scientific measurements revealed that many of them were close to being perfect spheres. But the toughest question to answer is why these stones were made. What was their purpose? No one knows for sure. Number 14. Eels that hunt in packs. When darkness comes, electric eels emerge from South American river bottoms in the Amazon rainforest to attack their prey with up to 860 volts of electricity, enough to kill a person. Now scientists have revealed that these snake-like fish don't always go for it alone. In fact, they hunt in packs similar to wolves, orcas, and some species of tuna. The finding, a first among electric eels, is set to kickstart new studies to investigate when this social predation evolved among the animals. Douglas Bastos, a biologist at the National Institute of Amazonian Research, who first saw a group attack in 2012, was shocked. Usually the eels, which can grow as long as a broomstick and weigh up to 20 kilograms, prey alone at night, targeting single resting fishes, he noted. This behavior is unusual not only for freshwater fish, but particularly for electric eels. Bastos observed the attack on an expedition while searching for endangered sea creatures in northern Brazil. 2 years later, he went back for a closer look. Camping alone in the middle of the Amazon, a 5-day journey by boat from the nearest city of Altamira, he filmed hundreds of electric eels in groups of 10 repeatedly attacking small tetra fishes on the Uriri River, which is a tributary of the Amazon River in northern Brazil. That must have been some sight. Number 13. The Nazi Hideout. A mysterious refuge among the vegetation of Taquare Park in Argentina's Misiones province is thought to be the remains of a secret World War II hideout. Archaeologists were looking closely at 3 dilapidated buildings in Argentina's jungles in 2015. Why? Because among the artifacts discovered, there was a porcelain plate labeled "Made in Germany" and 5 German coins. That, however, is not the end of the story. Everyone was surprised to learn that these were actually Nazi-era German coins. According to the expedition's team leader, Daniel Chavalzon, the small cluster of buildings was just one of many sites planned during World War II, because even the most dedicated Nazi needed a backup plan. Chavalzon explained that the Nazis were working on a covert project to provide safe havens for top leaders if things went wrong. As a result, they built these inaccessible sites in the middle of deserts, mountains, on cliffs, or in the middle of jungles, such as the one where the researchers ended up. The buildings were clearly designed with security in mind, with some walls measuring up to 9 feet thick, according to the BBC. So were they ever put to use? They say it's highly unlikely for a very dubious reason. Argentina's then President Juan Perón had an open-door policy allowing Nazis to resettle in the country. Archaeologists note that if Adolf Eichmann, the man who engineered the Holocaust, was allowed to live happily and freely in Buenos Aires, the chances of other leaders opting for jungle life were pretty slim. Number 12. The Panamanian Gold Frog. Finding a frog in the jungle may not sound unusual, but the Panamanian golden frog is pretty cool. According to The Guardian, the world first learned about the little golden frog in a 2006 documentary. The frog was not only poisonous, but it also had a clever way of communicating: semaphore. Researchers filming the frogs for the BBC discovered that the areas where the frogs lived, in mountains, streams, and deep within the jungle, were extremely noisy. Other frogs couldn't hear the usual croaks and ribbits, so these little guys developed a complex system of waving their arms, twitching their legs, and stamping their feet to communicate. Isn't that cool? Unfortunately, according to the Smithsonian, they are critically endangered. Even as the BBC was filming, the spread of a chytrid fungus was decimating the area's frog populations. Fortunately, researchers were able to save a small number of the little waving frogs, hoping not only to find a cure for the disease that was driving them to extinction, but also to increase their numbers and repopulate the wild. Number 11. The fascinating Pink Lake. Consider the following scenario. It is 1802 and Matthew Flinders, a British navigator and cartographer aboard the HMS Investigator, disembarks on what is now known as Middle Island. He's in the Recherche archipelago off Australia's south coast, and it's time to start exploring. He shoulders his way through the dense jungle, reaches the highest peak, looks around at the landscape, and is amazed. Well, what he saw was a bright pink lake, and while he was probably unfamiliar with strawberry milkshakes, that's exactly what the color makes one think of. He later described the forest as rose-colored, which is also pretty close. When he and his crew arrived at the lake, which was also very salty, they were able to restock their entire ship with just the salt that had crystallized along the shores. According to Interesting Engineering, Flinders named the lake Hillier in honor of a crew member who died while the ship was docked at the island. And it turns out that the lake's color is affected by supersalinity. Because the water is so salty, bacteria and archaea are the most common microscopic life forms that can survive there. These organisms have a pigment in their cell membranes that is responsible for the pink color of the water, which is why the lake is that color too. Isn't that cool? Number 10. The Lost City of the Monkey God. Archaeologists had been hearing rumors of a city in Honduras's jungle for years. It was sometimes referred to as La Ciudad Blanca, the White City, and at other times as the Lost City of the Monkey God, and in 2015 the city transitioned from myth to reality. Legend has it that the city was founded by indigenous people fleeing the relentless conquest and slaughter brought by the Spanish conquistadors. Expeditions in the early 20th century returned only rumors, and it wasn't until 2010 that a new technology called LiDAR, light detection and ranging, arrived on the scene that progress began. Scanning revealed an extensive city hidden in the jungle, and archaeologists finally hacked their way through the trees to find the long-abandoned ancient city in 2015, according to National Geographic. And what they discovered was astounding. Perfectly preserved and untouched stone structures, pyramids, carvings, vessels and jars, thrones and tables. Archaeological investigation has been slow, but the site has yielded some other results. The untouched paradise was discovered to be home to a number of endangered plants, birds, insects, and reptiles, and Conservation International described it as a refuge for threatened species. Oh, and Douglas Preston, who was part of the first expedition, told The Verge that they discovered something else, a flesh-eating disease that rots off a person's nose and lips first. And yes, the explorers all came home with it, so maybe leave this one to the professionals. Number 9. The City of Nan Madol. Nan Madol is a breathtakingly beautiful city, so it's no wonder that according to Atlas Obscura, Nan Madol inspired H.P. Lovecraft's vision of R'lyeh. Its praise is also sung by the Smithsonian, which calls it an engineering marvel, and the only thing left of the Saudalar, people who were equally religious and cruel, and left behind a city of stone that's still thought to be the home to many ghosts. Creepy, yes, but archaeologists discovered something unexpected within the ruins in 2016, the key to unraveling the mystery of how mankind evolved from simple societies to more complex societies. According to Science Daily, uranium series dating enabled researchers to pinpoint the date of construction of an early chief's tomb between 1180 and 1200, and the size of the tomb is significant as well. Historians say that because they've discovered what amounts to a recent evolution from a simple society to a complex one ruled by a single chieftain over a series of islands and tribes, they still have access to something else: oral history. And why is this significant? It gives archaeologists hope that they will be able to pinpoint the event that caused the Nanmadol society to reorganize itself into a society ruled by a chieftain wielding shocking amounts of power, and that this will help us understand how societies have evolved over time. Number 8. The Lost Inca Gold. The Inca gold story begins in the 16th century when Spanish explorer and all-around bad guy Francisco Pizarro demanded a ransom. If the Inca brought him a room full of gold, he'd release King Atahualpa. Luckily for Atahualpa, they began collecting the ransom. Unfortunately for Atahualpa, Pizarro was an impatient jerk who had him executed nonetheless. According to National Geographic, this is where the story becomes murky. The ransom was said to be hidden in a secret cave. Well, somewhere. But there is evidence that it's been discovered several times. The first was around 50 years later when a Spaniard named Valverde came into some money, claiming that his Incan wife's family had shown him where the treasure was. He left instructions on how to find it. The guide and map vanished until the 1850s, but it wasn't until 1886 that a treasure hunter named Barth Blake followed up on it and reported finding the treasure. He described life-sized human, bird, and animal figures made of gold and jewels, gold vases filled with emeralds, and the most beautiful goldsmith works that one could imagine. Blake took what he could carry and left, intending to return. Only he vanished on his way back to New York, and all attempts to track him down have failed. So where did he go, and will someone else be able to locate the gold? Number 7. Thousands of Mayan structures. In the grand scheme of things, the Maya were only around 1500 years ago, according to the BBC, but there's a shocking amount we don't know about them, and a 2018 discovery demonstrated just how much we still don't know. Researchers used LiDAR, which allowed them to essentially peel back the layers of the jungle by bouncing laser light off the ground and measuring and interpreting the returning wavelengths. Researchers used LiDAR to map the jungles of Guatemala, and by the end, they had discovered and mapped approximately 60,000 previously unknown Mayan ruins. Archaeologists estimate that going through all of the data LiDAR uncovered will take the next century, and that is essentially 3,000 years of Mayan history condensed to a topographical map. Even at a glance, they've discovered some incredible things. Previously thought uninhabitable areas of the jungle were occupied, and the Maya spent more time and resources building defensive structures than were previously thought. Population numbers have also skyrocketed, with estimates putting the civilization's peak population at between 10 and 15 million people. And also discovered, well, if we can lose a 7-story tall pyramid, we can lose almost anything. Number 6. Phnom Kulen. Everyone has heard of Angkor Wat, the most famous of Cambodia's ancient temple complexes, according to National Geographic. But we're not going to talk about it. Not exactly. There was another complex just down the road that was even more elusive. Archaeologists had known about this ancient complex for nearly a century, but it wasn't discovered until 2012. According to the Smithsonian, that's when researchers confirmed the existence of a sprawling group of temples, palaces, and other structures high up on a 1,300-foot plateau known as Phnom Kulen. And it's also when they had the technology to truly appreciate just how large the settlement was. Although it is only about 25 miles from Angkor, this recently discovered complex predates Angkor by about 3 centuries. Consider it a technological blueprint. It contains the same imagery, buildings, and even an impressively advanced water supply that was first partially discovered in 1936. That's when a French archaeologist mapped the ruins of 17 temples, but Angkor Wat was just easier to get to at the time. According to the Smithsonian, Peninsulan was largely ignored except by the Khmer Rouge, who occupied the plateau until 1998. Finally, LiDAR confirmed what the French team had begun to uncover almost a century before. They had discovered the 9th century fortress of King Jayavarman II, the city that would serve as a template for one of Asia's most iconic temple complexes. Number 5. The poison and medicine, curare. When the Spanish conquistadors began exploring and conquering South America, they encountered something terrifying: poison arrows. According to M.R. Lee, Emeritus Professor of Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics at the University of Edinburgh, explorers returned to Europe in the 16th century, describing arrows that first paralyzed and then killed their target. It took around 200 years for European invaders to realize that the native peoples were making a plant paste and applying it to their arrows, and even then, European explorers weren't able to identify the plant until the 1800s. For a while, it was just a poison, but if it was just a poison, it wouldn't be such an exciting find, would it? Now jump ahead to the 20th century with an explorer named Richard C. Gill. In 1938, he and his neurologist began searching for a cure for a neurological condition he had developed after a horseback riding accident in the Amazon. Among the secrets indigenous peoples revealed to him were various recipes for making curare poison, which two Canadian anesthetists realized could be used for a different purpose. General anesthesia was still being used for invasive surgeries in 1942. Injecting the proper curare preparation served as a super-localized muscle relaxant, altering the way surgeries were performed. Curare went from poison to lifesaver in 400 years. Number 4. The Boiling River. The stories were first told to Andres Russo by his Peruvian grandfather. It was said that there was a river deep in the jungle that was so hot that it boiled. It also followed that whatever fell into it would be boiled alive. Scary. Fast forward to when Russo became a geophysicist, and it goes without saying that a boiling river is definitely real. According to National Geographic, Russo decided to investigate whether such a thing was possible. Not only did he realize that it could have existed, but he also discovered the river. The river is 5.5 miles long but boils for only about 3.8 miles. And yes, small animals that fall in are boiled alive. Further investigation revealed that it's a completely natural geothermal phenomenon that's extremely lethal, and one that local tribes have been aware of for a long time. According to their ancient beliefs, the river has tremendous spiritual power, and the vapor that rises from the boiling river carries the prayers of all living things to the Creator. And that's a pretty lovely idea, just don't slip. Number 3. The cure for malaria. Malaria may conjure up images of mosquito-infested jungles, but here's the thing: there was no malaria in South America until Europeans arrived and brought it with them. It was a gift that kept on giving, spreading faster than the Europeans themselves. Malaria had already arrived in the Andes by the time explorers arrived, and in an amazing twist, so had the cure. The bark of the cinchona tree, which native people had long used to treat fever, was the cure. It was only natural that they would use it to treat this new disease, and it worked. It wasn't until much later in 1820 the French scientists discovered how to extract the active ingredient from the bark, quinine. According to the BBC, a popular story claiming that it was a Spanish noblewoman who discovered it could be used to treat malaria has been widely debunked, but one thing is certain: it was a huge deal. It saved so many British lives throughout the 19th century that it was regarded as one of the tools of imperialism that enabled the British Empire to colonize malaria-infested areas such as India. It was not replaced as a malaria treatment until the 1970s, by which time it had saved an unimaginable number of lives and had had a major global impact. Number 2. Mayan ruins at Palenque. Father Pedro Lorenzo de Lanada, a Spaniard, published the first account of this lost city in 1567. He discovered the stone temples and plazas near the Usumacinta River in the modern Mexican state of Chiapas, which were originally decorated with blue and red painted stucco but had long been abandoned by the Maya who built them. Lorenzo named the massive structure Palenque, which means fortification in Spanish. Palenque, one of Mexico's most visited archaeological sites, is a modern wellspring from which researchers have drawn some of the most detailed information about Maya culture 500 years later. According to experts, it was not large, being dwarfed by cities such as Calakmul and Tikal, and David Stewart of Harvard's Peabody Museum reported in 2003 that Palenque could only support 6,220 people at its peak. However, Palenque is famous for something else. Michael D. Carrasco, an assistant professor of art history at Florida State University, explained that Palenque wasn't known for its size or age, as other sites are much larger and much older. Its significance stems from its naturalistic sculpture, architectural inventiveness, and meticulous epigraphic record. Palenque's wealth of epigraphy, inscriptions, and recorded history has assisted archaeologists in constructing the first timeline of Maya rulers, one that, while impressive, is still a little hazy in places, so there's a lot more work to be done. Number 1. The ancient Inca figurines. The small golden figurines that once belonged to the Incas are so similar to modern-day aeroplanes that they continue to astound researchers even today. The question of whether these ancient forms actually depict an actual prototype remains unanswered as well. The Incas inhabited South America, with the largest tribe residing in what is now Colombia's province of Tolima. For hundreds of years, the area was inhabited, but it was also the site of the discovery of the first aeroplane figurines, which scientists estimated to be 1,200 to 1,500 years old. The Incas may have used them as nose and ear decorations, but the big mystery is why they look so much like modern aeroplanes. In 1969, Emanuel Staub, an American jeweler, gave the winged figurine in his possession to his friend Ivan Sanderson, a well-known zoologist and the head of the Society for the Study of Unexplained Phenomena. Sanderson consulted several aviation experts who explained that the figures perfectly match models of flying aircraft. Similar figurines have been discovered not only in Colombia, but also in Venezuela and Peru. But why did they design them so specifically? And if they existed, where did all these planes go? Jungles have been a massive source of information and mysteries of our planet, but there's a lot more research necessary before we can feel we've actually learned it all, and we don't even know if that's actually possible. Scientists have discovered that mysterious mounds in the southwest corner of the Amazon basin were once the site of ancient urban settlements. Beginning somewhere around 1,500 years ago, ancient Amazonians built and lived in densely populated centers surrounded by kilometers of elevated roadways. The complexity of these settlements is mind-boggling, according to team member Heiko Prumers, an archaeologist with the German Archaeological Institute in Berlin. Jonas Gregorio de Souza, an archaeologist at Barcelona's Pompeu Fabra University, also added that this was the first clear evidence of urban societies in this part of the Amazon basin. The study adds to a growing body of evidence that the Amazon, long thought to be a pristine wilderness before Europeans arrived, was home to advanced societies long before that. Humans have lived in the Amazon basin for around 10,000 years, where a vast river drainage system roughly the size of the continental United States also exists. Prior to the arrival of Europeans in the 16th century, researchers believed that all Amazonians lived in small nomadic tribes with little impact on the world around them. And while early European visitors described a landscape densely packed with towns and villages, later explorers were unable to pinpoint these locations. Archaeologists had yet to confirm the rumors by the 20th century and argued that the Amazon's nutrient-poor soil couldn't support large-scale agriculture and that it would have prevented tropical civilizations similar to those found in Central America and Southeast Asia from arising in the Amazon. But by the 2000s, archaeological opinion was beginning to shift. Some researchers theorized that because of the presence of several domesticated plants in the area, as well as areas of nutrient-rich soil, humans had once lived in those places. To put it plainly, they'd shaped the very environment of the Amazon. The theory gained even further support after archaeologists reported hundreds of large geometric mounds discovered due to deforestation in the southern Amazon rainforest in 2018. These structures suggested ancient organized societies capable of thriving in one location for years had no doubt existed there. But there was no direct evidence of settlements. However, Prumers began researching a group of mounds in the Bolivian Amazon basin outside of the dense rainforest in 1999. Previous excavations had revealed that these forest islands had human habitation, including the mysterious Kasarabe culture, which appeared around 500 AD. During one excavation, Prumas and his colleagues discovered what appeared to be a wall, indicating that the area had once been occupied by a permanent settlement. The researchers also discovered graves, platforms, and other evidence of a complex society. However, the dense vegetation made it difficult for them to survey the site using traditional methods. By the 2010s, archaeologists were enamored with a LiDAR, a remote sensing technology that uses lasers to generate a 3D image of the ground below. A LiDAR survey of the Honduran Valley in 2012 aided in the rediscovery of an ancient pre-Columbian city thought to have existed in the area. The jungle had completely overtaken the settlement since it was abandoned in the 15th century, making aerial viewing nearly impossible without LiDAR. In 2019, Prumas and his colleagues decided to use LiDAR and fly a helicopter equipped with the technology over 6 areas near sites that were confirmed to be occupied by the Kasarabe people. The team got more than they bargained for, with LiDAR revealing the size and shape of 26 settlements, including 11 that researchers weren't looking for. A massive task that would have taken 400 years to survey using traditional methods, according to Prumas. 2 of the urban areas were larger than 100 hectares, 3 times the size of the Vatican City. The LiDAR images revealed walled compounds with broad terraces rising 6 meters above ground level. Earthen pyramids towered above one end of the terraces. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, people most likely lived in the areas surrounding the terraces and traveled along the causeways that linked the sites. Prumas explained that for some reason, the world had this mental image of Amazonia as a green desert, but there was no proof of that, so why shouldn't something like that exist in the forest? But while we have answers to some questions, many remain unanswered. It is still unknown why these settlements were abandoned after 900 years. The Kasarabe vanished around 1400 according to radiocarbon dating. According to Pruma's LiDAR images revealed reservoirs in the settlements, possibly indicating that this part of the world wasn't always wet, which indicated an environmental shift that may have driven people away. Consistent pollen records, on the other hand, show that maize, also known as corn, had grown in the area for thousands of years, which further indicated sustainable agricultural practices. The discovery of long-lost Amazonian societies changed the general perspective people have of Amazonian archaeology, according to Eduardo Neves, an archaeologist at Brazil's University of São Paulo. He believes that current logging and farming in the Amazon basin are almost certainly destroying important archaeological sites that have yet to be discovered, but that growing interest in Amazonian archaeology may lead to the protection of vulnerable areas. These findings also refute the popular belief that indigenous peoples were passive inhabitants of the Amazon basin prior to the arrival of Europeans. The people who lived there forever changed the landscape. Of course, their contributions should be preserved in our history. And if you thought this discovery was surprising, well, you're in for a treat. Archaeologists found a vast network of Amazon villages laid out like the cosmos. Billions of lasers shot from a helicopter flying over the Brazilian Amazon rainforest have detected a vast network of long-abandoned, circular and rectangular-shaped villages dating from 1300 to 1700, according to another new study. The round villages all had remarkably similar layouts, with elongated mounds circling a central plaza like marks on a clock. The researchers explained that when seen from above, these latter elongated mounds looked like the rays of the sun, which gave them the common name of sóis, the Portuguese word for suns. The Amazon finally gave up its secrets after many years of study and confirmed that civilizations in the millions once thrived in the area. And while that may be a surprise, there's one thing we've always known about the rainforest, which is that it's home to millions of species apart from humans. So of course, they stumbled across a fossil that helped gap 15 million years of missing data. The remains of the smallest fossil monkey ever discovered have been discovered by a team of Peruvian and American scientists. A fossilized tooth discovered in Peru's Amazon jungle has been identified as belonging to a new species of hamster-sized monkey. According to a team led by Duke University and the National University of Piura in Peru, this specimen is significant because it bridges a 15 million year gap in the fossil record for New World monkeys. The new fossil was discovered in southeastern Peru on an exposed riverbank along the Rio Alto Madre de Dios. Researchers excavated sandstone and gravel chunks, placed them in bags, and hauled them away to be soaked in water and strained through sieves to extract the fossilized teeth, jaws, and bone fragments buried within. And sure, it was hard work. The team combed through 2,000 pounds of sediment containing hundreds of rodents, bats, and other animal fossils before discovering the lone monkey tooth, but their patience paid off big time. The first author, Richard Kay, a Duke University professor of evolutionary anthropology who had been conducting paleontological research in South America for nearly 4 decades, stated that primate fossils are not easy to come across. The specimen, a single upper molar, was double the size of the head of a pin and could fall through a window screen. If you're wondering why a tooth could have caused such excitement, it's because monkey teeth, particularly molars, can reveal a lot to paleontologists. Based on the relative size and shape of the tooth, the researchers believe the animal ate energy-rich fruits and insects and weighed less than half a pound, only slightly heavier than a baseball. That's tiny compared to some of South America's large monkeys such as howlers and murrakees, which can weigh up to 50 pounds. Kay explained that it was by far the smallest fossil monkey ever discovered anywhere on the planet. Only one living monkey species, the teacup-sized pygmy marmoset, was smaller but only barely. The team named the animal Parvomiko matadai, or tiny monkey from Mother of God River, in a paper published in the Journal of Human Evolution. The discovery, which is now housed in the permanent collections of Peru's National University of Piura's Institute of Paleontology, is significant because it's one of the few clues scientists have from a key missing chapter in monkey evolution. Monkeys are thought to have arrived in South America from Africa 40 million years ago, rapidly diversifying into the 150-plus New World species we know today, the majority of which live in the Amazon rainforest. But how that process played out is a bit of a mystery, thanks in part to a gap in the monkey fossil record between 13 and 31 million years ago, with only a few fragments that just haven't been enough. Parvomiko lived in that void. The new fossil dates back 17 to 19 million years, putting it smack dab in the period when researchers would have expected diversification in the New World monkeys. The Parvomiko may have been new to researchers, so of course its discovery was exciting, but the Amazon is also giving us new details about animals we know exist today. For instance, electric eels were seen to have hunted in packs in the Amazon rivers. When darkness comes, electric eels emerge from South American river bottoms to attack their prey with up to 860 volts of electricity, enough to kill a person. Now scientists have revealed that the snake-like fish don't always go it alone. They hunt in packs similar to wolves, orcas, or some species of tuna. The finding, a first among electric fishes, may open the way for new studies to investigate when social predation evolved among fishes. Douglas Bastos, a biologist at the National Institute of Amazonian Research who first saw a group attack in 2012, was shocked. Usually the eels, which can grow as long as a broomstick and weigh up to 20 kilograms, prey alone at night, targeting single resting fishes, he notes. This behavior is unusual not only for freshwater fish, but also for electrical eels. Bastos witnessed the attack on an expedition looking for endangered fish in northern Brazil. 2 years later, he went back for a closer look. Camping alone in the middle of the Amazon, a 5-day journey by boat from the nearest city of Altamira, he filmed hundreds of electric eels in groups of 10, reportedly attacking small tetra fishes on the Iriri River, a tributary of the Ingu River, which is a tributary of the Amazon River in northern Brazil. The eels were Electrophorus volti, which deliver the strongest shock ever measured in a living animal. So far, the group attacks have only been recorded in the low water season, which runs from June to November. During these months, which see a significant reduction in rainfall, fish in the region's rivers are squeezed into far less water than normal, making them easy pickings for the eel packs. The eels simply have to find a pool full of fish and ambush them. In the high water season, prey would likely have a much better chance of keeping a safe distance and getting away, says co-author Carlos David de Santana, a co-author and biologist at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History. The researchers don't know how this behavior evolved, how widespread it is, and whether it happens only during the low water season. But Santana has some thoughts on how the eels might pick out their groups. Based on a straightforward individual-level principle, continue hunting with the same people when successful and a stable group eventually forms, this social predation may have developed. Most of the time, the eels rested at the bottom of the river, but at dawn and dusk, they moved to a shallow pool at the riverbank where they herded shoals of fish and launched joint attacks, immobilizing and devouring their prey. Each hunt usually took 2 hours and involved up to 7 attacks, the researchers report today in Ecology and Evolution. William Crampton, a biologist at the University of Central Florida who was not part of the work, was just as fascinated by this new evidence. He has been studying electric fishes for 25 years and says the findings could spur further research into how the eels use electric discharges to navigate and communicate. Bastos and his colleagues next plan to sequence the genomes of the eels in hopes of identifying genes linked to social predation shared by other animals that display this behavior, including mammals like whales. This could give them clues to better understand the history of this trait's evolution among a wide variety of animals. Crampton suspects other species of electric eels may utilize the same hunting strategy. On a recent trip to Guyana, he says that he heard reports from indigenous peoples about shoals of fish jumping out of the water near large groups of electric eels of another species, E. electricus. Although he has never personally observed this behavior, if the reports are accurate, it is possible that it's not unique to E. volti. In any event, the researchers will have to act fast because human destruction of the Amazon is wiping out these habitats, Santana says. The sad reality is that it's probable that these areas won't be preserved for another 5 or 10 years. And the reason for that is climate change, which always makes us gulp a few times. When we talk about the Amazon rainforest, the news is never good. Through 2019 and 2020, the news has been dominated by images of forests ablaze and a land racked by climate change and illegal logging. But while researchers may feel hopeless, there's still a lot that scientists don't yet understand. A new study published in Science Advances is a case in point. In it, scientists revealed some puzzling ecological traits in the wettest regions of the Amazon, which suggested the rainforest may be tougher than we think. Hold on, there's science coming into play. Scientists looked at the relationship between increasing air dryness, also known as vapor pressure deficit, and gross primary production in the Amazon. Gross primary production refers to the total amount of carbon that plants in forests fix or uptake during photosynthesis. The scientists used observational data from 9 years between June 2007 and May 2016 and input the data into a machine learning tool known as an artificial neural network. These networks helped the researchers understand and compare their results with existing models and simulations of how dry air changes the Amazon's ability to act as a carbon sink. Okay, is this getting too hard to follow? Maybe lead author Julia K. Green can help out. She offered her insight on the study at the Laboratory of Sciences of Climate and the Environment in France and explained it to inverse. She essentially wanted to devise a method with which she could use different environmental predictors and input those into a model to predict photosynthesis. But putting these theories to the test is the real deal. Armed with their model, Green and her colleagues then compared typical predictions of land surface simulations to learn what's going on in the Amazon. Green said that the models would help make climate change predictions too. Of course, a rainforest of that magnitude and accurate model is needed. The wetter parts of the Amazon boast trees with deep root systems, but the models show that vegetation in these areas can become stressed due to water deficit caused by increasingly dry air or soil, and Green emphasized that this water deficit can severely impact photosynthesis. Let's revise a little grade school biology here now. Plants have these little pores on their leaves called stomata. It's via these pores that carbon dioxide enters into the plant. But as the plant takes some carbon dioxide, it loses water through the leaf surface because the air is drier. As a result, the drier the air, the more closed the stomata are going to become to conserve water, she explained. The researchers assumed, and so did their models, that the closing of the stomata from air dryness would reduce photosynthesis. What they observed was that the photosynthesis in these rainforest places was declining in the model simulations when there was just a little bit of dryness. They weren't certain if that appeared to be practical or not. That's where the artificial neural networks came in. Green used their findings to come to a surprising conclusion. The simulation models were wrong. They discovered that photosynthesis increased in these moist parts of the forest as the vapor pressure deficit raised. The reason why is to do with the nature of the Amazon forest itself. The Amazon has a very dynamic forest canopy, Green stressed, which compensated for the closing of the stomata and counterintuitively increased photosynthesis. It's almost a wonder to behold how something as seemingly simple as photosynthesis could also be adaptable. There is a lot of natural resilience that baffled even the most skilled researchers. Green continued that what ultimately happened was that the forest ended up dropping a lot of these old leaves at the top of the canopy when the air started to dry. Eventually, new, younger leaves took their place, and compared to the leaves they were replacing, these new, younger leaves were able to increase their photosynthetic activity and easily adapt to the drier air. The Amazon serves as one of the world's most important carbon sinks, and that carbon sink relies on photosynthesis to survive. But these results suggested the Amazon had natural resilience during periods of drier air. Although whether the findings suggest the Amazon holds up better against extreme weather events like drought brought on by climate change is unclear, according to Green. And yet it's not just the plants that are unique in their adaptation. There are shocking discoveries hidden everywhere. The fact of the matter is that the Amazon is way too large and way too dense for humans to study all of it instantaneously. And with climate change causing harm to the environment, many mysteries of the Amazon may disappear before we can get to it. Unless the world takes a stance and does its best to protect the Earth, we may remain ignorant of all the treasures that lie beneath the canopy visible to us.